Hi, and welcome to another Flutter video. This time let's have a look into a package called FlutterGen. It's a helpful package which generates classes for us that hold names of assets. If we scroll down to the motivation section over here, you can see that in order to define what assets are used in our project, first we need to add these assets, but then also define them inside of the pubspec file. And then in order to actually use the asset in the project, we have to call it by the actual path. So if our asset sits in the assets images profile.jpg, then we have to call this asset inside of an image.asset over here with the full path assets image profile.jpg. And I guess here it will not work since the extension is a little bit different than it should be. Anyways, of course we wouldn't do it in a normal project because this is unmaintainable. And it's unmaintainable because if we want to use this asset in many places in our project, then each time we would put this same string over and over. The problem comes when we want to change the name of this asset. So for example, profile would become profile mini, and then we add profile big JPEG. So in order to update that, we would have to find each place where this asset is used and change it. In order to avoid that, we usually create some constants, some classes with static values, and then we put our strings over there, so then we can reuse them and change only once if the name changes. However, this is a process that is easy to be automated. And this package is doing exactly that. It's automating this process. So instead of using this string over here, our own constant, we would call assets.images.profile and .image to get an image. And by using here this .image, we will already get a widget, but we can also get the name, we can get the path and a lot of other stuff. If we scroll down over here, you can see how to use it. So we have to add it to the dev dependencies. The other option is to activate it on global scope, and then we can use it inside of our command line. In order to generate a class, we can use this Flutter packages pub run build runner build command, and probably we'll have to add the flag to delete conflicting outputs as they frequently conflict. And in case we activate it on the global scope, then we can use this FlutterGen command then. This plugin comes with a little bit of configuration, so we can set, for example, where the generated files will be outputted. We can also set some line length for these files, which defaults to 80. And you can see we also can specify what kind of integration we want to use. For example, if you are using Flutter SVG, you can use this integration, and then the plugin will generate special code for SVGs for you. It also works with Rive, with Flare, and with Lottie. Then it's also possible to use colors. There is a special feature in this package that we can define these XML files with colors, and this will be also converted into a Dart class, or a Dart class will be generated. Down here you can see some fonts defined, and with fonts it's similar like with assets. There are files like TTF files over here, and there can be a special class generated, for example, for this railway, whatever the pronunciation is, that we can access then the font without using the string. So basically it works like for the other assets. Now down here you can see we have a couple of options that are generated. So if we have this assets images chip.jpg, we can get an asset image class by using this .chip. If we use .chip.image, we will get image class. If we use .provider, we will get image provider. We also can get path and values. Now down here, in case we are using the Flutter SVG integration, then there will be an option also to, for this paint.svg, have this paint.svg in the code over here, and this will return already the SVG picture for us. Here is a little bit more also about the configuration of this package. So by default, as you could see, we are accessing everything with a dot. So for example, for the assets chip3 chip, we will have assets.images.chip3.chip. But we could also opt into other way of defining it. So we can say that we want the generated code to be accessible directly from the assets, but we're using camel case instead. We can do it by setting the outputs to style camel case over here. And then the assets will be like this, assets.images chip in camel case, or in snake, or if we prefer the default one, then with a dot. Here is a cloned example of the FlutterGen repository, and we will have a look how it is configured and what we can do with it, and also what is the generated code. So first of all, let's look into the pubspec YAML. So first of all, for the integrations, they added here all these packages. So for example, it integrates with Flutter SVG, so we add it in the dependencies. And then in dev dependencies, we have the build runner to run the code generation, and we have the FlutterGen runner, which holds the algorithm which will generate the asset classes for us. Below here we have the configuration for FlutterGen, some default options for output and line length, and then we have integrations turned to on, and then we also have enabled assets, so we can actually disable generating assets over here. And they also rename the class, the default class which would be asset, to call it the res assets, so we can also do that. Then if you want it to also be integrated with fonts, you can enable or disable it, and also the same with colors. And in case you are using colors, then you have to specify the XML file over here and not in the assets down here. And then in the Flutter section over here in the assets, we just define our assets as we would do in any other project. At this point, let's have a look over here in the project. We have this colors file, and in the colors XML we have a couple of colors set. And they have names over here, for example white, and then inside of the tag we have the white color defined in RGB. Then down here in the images directory, you can see we have a couple of examples. We will check especially this dart.svg, which is an SVG picture. And then down here, for example, we have this flutter.free.jpg. We will also have a look into that. I've added a very simple mine file to this, which is just running an application, because there was nothing more than the generated code in the example that I've cloned. But before we actually look into the code, let's run the generator. So first of all, if you are running the application for the first time, don't forget to run flutter pub-get. In any subsequent call, you can already run the build runner directly. There we go. The build runner completed, we don't get any errors. And now in the lib directory over here, in the gen directory, which was defined and which is also default directory for output, you can see these two files. So we have assets.gen.dart and colors.gen.dart. Here we go. So if we compare it with the colors.xml, let's open both of them, you can see that the colors were transformed into the Dart class called color names, and every color is now a static const color with a color value. Notice that here we didn't add the alpha channel value, but here the colors already have the alpha channel value for us. The second generated file is this assets.gen.dart, and this is taking care of the assets. But before we look into the generated code, let's have a look into the mine. So this is a very simple widget which is called up to be just like a mine application widget. And inside we can access some image. So let's say instead of this container we would like to have an image. And usually what we would do if we want to take this image from assets, we just type an image asset. There we go, and here we can specify path to image.jpg. Something like this. But now when we have this generated code, then instead of that we can call res assets. Remember that in the configuration the name class was set to res assets. If we wouldn't set it, then the default name would be assets. We can call it images, and then flutter free, and then path. And with this we will get the path to the asset. However, we can do it a little bit better, so instead we could have a return, and now we can call this directly res assets images flutter free, and then dot image. And this will return the widget for us that will contain an image, and of course we have a whole bunch of options over here, like width, let's give it 333, logical pixels, and height, which will be 3333 logical pixels. And you can see the compiler is not complaining, or interpreter is not complaining over here. We can normally return it. In case we would like to use a color somewhere, then we can just use color names, color name, and then get our black color, and then just assign it to something. Let's see if this image has a color. Yes, it has a color. So we can use color name over here, and let's use this gray 70. And that's it. In the end, let's also have a look into the generated assets file to see how it works under the hood. So if we scroll up over here, you can see first we have this asset images gen class, and this class is holding references to all the paths that we have with the specific types. So for example, the Dart image over here, that.svg, is an SVG file. So the generator generated an instance of SVG gen image, and you can see it has assigned the path to the assets. So assets images dart.svg is over here. So in case we have some resource that is of a type flare, then here we have return this flare gen image. And then we have an assets gen image for just a normal image like JPEG. Let's have a look into the assets gen image. So here is defined the class asset gen image, just below the res assets, which you've seen before, where we can actually access everything. So how it works is that this is specified with a static const, and then we have these images over here, and this is pointing to this assets images gen file over here. And then from there we can get all the images of different types. But in the assets gen image class, we have a couple of things. So first of all, we have this method that you've seen, .image, that we used, and this is returning an image. And this method is returning an image, which is nothing more than image.asset, what we would be doing otherwise ourselves in the code. And you can see that this generated code is also porting all of the possible properties to this image.asset over here. Then down here we have a couple of other things, so you can also use the image provider, which is the asset image, which is just a different way to defining images from assets in our code. So if you need the provider, you can just use .provider. Finally, for path, it will just access this asset name. And asset name is set here in the constructor, and the constructor was set over here. For example, for the Flutter free.jpg over here, just with a string with a path. So path just will return a path. And finally, we also can get some key name over here, which is set to packages, example resources, and then also we have the full path. For other types of resources, we have other classes generated, which will just correspond to the different packages that we might want to use. So for SVG, we have this SVGGen image over here, which will return for the SVG, now SVG picture from the Flutter SVG library. And similar thing is done over here for FlutterGen image, as well as over here for Rive, and over here for Lottie. And that's all the generated code that this library has provided for us. I hope this video helped you to learn anything. If so, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I see you in the next one, hopefully pretty soon. But for now, I code you to death. Bye bye.